The emergency beacon cut through the silence of deep space like a scream in the void. Sat in the pilot's chair of his small cargo hauler, the Lucky Strike, watching the distress signal pulse on his navigation display. Red dots always meant trouble in this sector of the galaxy, and had learned to avoid trouble. It kept him alive, kept him flying, and kept the credits flowing into his account. But this beacon was different. It wasn't broadcasting on any of the standard emergency frequencies that pirates like to fake. Instead, it transmitted on an ancient Terran medical band, one that most species in the galaxy had forgotten about decades ago. Only someone with access to old human databases would know to use that frequency. Rubbed his tired eyes and considered his options. He was 3 days out from station with a hold full of rare earth minerals. The cargo was worth enough to keep him flying for 6 months, maybe more if he negotiated well. Stopping to investigate a distress call would add at least a day to his journey, possibly more. Time meant money, and money meant survival. The beacon pulsed again and noticed something that made his blood run cold. The signal was weakening. Whatever was out there, it was dying. "Damn it," he muttered, pulling up the navigation charts. The signal originated from a small asteroid field about 2 hours away. It wasn't marked on any of the shipping lanes, which meant it was either unexplored or deliberately avoided. Neither option filled with confidence. He'd been flying solo cargo runs for 8 years now, ever since the Galactic Trade Commission had started requiring diversity compliance officers on all major shipping vessels. As one of the few remaining independent human operators, had found his niche in the forgotten corners of space where larger corporations couldn't be bothered to send their ships. It was dangerous work, but it was honest work, and it let him live by his own rules. The distress beacon pulsed again, weaker this time. Sighed and began plotting a course change. His mother had raised him to help people in trouble, and even though she'd been dead for 15 years, her voice still echoed in his head during moments like this. Some principles were worth more than credits. The Lucky Strike wasn't built for speed, but she was reliable. Had bought her from a scrap dealer who'd sworn she was cursed, then spent 2 years and most of his savings bringing her back to peak condition. The ship wasn't much to look at, but her engines were solid and her hull was reinforced with military-grade plating. In the dangerous sectors where made his living, that mattered more than beauty. As he approached the asteroid field, activated his ship's passive sensors and began scanning for the source of the distress signal. The asteroids here were larger than usual, some of them kilometers across and rich with heavy metals that played havoc with his instruments. It took him nearly an hour of careful searching before he found what he was looking for. The ship was wedged between 2 massive asteroids, barely visible against the dark rock. It was small, maybe half the size of the Lucky Strike, with a sleek design that didn't recognize. The hull was a deep purple color that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and strange geometric patterns covered its surface. Definitely not human, and not any of the common species he was used to dealing with. Tried hailing the vessel on multiple frequencies, but got no response. His sensors showed minimal power readings from the ship, and its hull was breached in at least 3 places. Whatever had happened here, it had happened fast and hard. He maneuvered the Lucky Strike carefully through the asteroid field, using her thrusters to match position with the damaged vessel. The ship's design was elegant but alien, with curves and angles that hurt to look at too long. Had seen enough different species over the years to know that this wasn't like anything in the standard galactic databases. As he prepared to dock, noticed something that made his stomach turn. The hull breaches weren't from asteroid impacts or equipment failure. They were deliberate. Perfectly circular holes had been burned through the ship's armor with military-grade plasma weapons. Someone had attacked this vessel, and they'd done it with the kind of firepower that could punch through reinforced plating like it was paper. Paused, his hand hovering over the docking controls. Getting involved in someone else's war was a good way to end up dead, and he'd worked too hard to build his little shipping business to throw it all away on a rescue mission. But the distress beacon was still transmitting, though barely, and his conscience wouldn't let him leave without at least checking for survivors. The docking procedure took longer than usual because of the damage to the alien ship's hull. Had to use his emergency clamps to create a seal, and even then he wasn't sure it would hold. He suited up in his environmental gear, checking his oxygen levels and emergency supplies twice before cycling through the airlock. The interior of the alien ship was a maze of curved corridors and organic-looking walls that pulsed with faint bioluminescent patterns. The air was thin, and had a metallic taste that made grateful for his suit's filtration system. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow, and the deck plates were slick with some kind of fluid that preferred not to think about. He followed the strongest life sign readings deeper into the ship, his boots echoing strangely in the cramped corridors. The damage here was even worse than what he'd seen from outside. Blast marks covered the walls, and several sections had been completely destroyed by whatever weapons had been used in the attack. Found the ship's bridge near the center of the vessel. The room was small and intimate, designed for a single occupant. Banks of strange controls covered the walls, their surfaces flickering with dying energy. And in the pilot's chair, slumped over the control console, was the most beautiful and terrifying being had ever seen. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin was a pale lavender color that seemed to glow with its own inner light, and her hair was silver white, flowing like liquid mercury down her back. She was tall and graceful, even unconscious, with features that were sharp and predatory. But what struck most were the scars. Her arms and face were covered with intricate scars that formed complex patterns, like tattoos carved into living flesh. She was dying, could see that immediately. Her breathing was shallow and labored, and dark fluid leaked from wounds in her side and shoulder. Her pilot's suit was torn and stained, and the smell of burned flesh filled the small bridge. Checked his suit's medical scanners and winced at the readings. The alien woman had lost a lot of blood, and her vital signs were failing. She needed medical attention immediately, the kind of care that his ship's basic medical bay might not be able to provide. But looking around the destroyed bridge, realized he was her only chance. He carefully lifted her from the pilot's chair, surprised by how light she felt despite her height. Her skin was warm to the touch, almost feverish, and she murmured something in a language he didn't recognize as he carried her toward the docking tube. Whatever she was, whoever she was someone's daughter, someone's friend. That was enough for. The trip back to his ship took longer than he'd hoped. The alien woman's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and twice he had to stop to check her vital signs. By the time he got her to his medical bay, she was barely breathing. Had learned basic field medicine during his early years as a cargo hauler, when medical stations were few and far between in the frontier sectors. His ship's medical bay was simple but effective, with an automated diagnostic system and basic treatment capabilities. It wasn't designed for alien physiology, but the fundamental principles of trauma care were universal. He worked quickly, using the medical scanner to assess her injuries. 3 plasma burns, severe blood loss, and what looked like internal damage from the attack. The scanner couldn't identify her species, but it could analyze her basic biological functions well enough to guide treatment. Cleaned and sealed the plasma burns with synthetic skin grafts, then administered a broad-spectrum coagulant to help stop the internal bleeding. The hardest part was determining the right dosage for her alien physiology. Too little, and it wouldn't work. Too much, and it could kill her. He split the difference and hoped for the best. As he worked, found himself studying her face. Even unconscious and injured, there was something regal about her, something that spoke of nobility and strength. The scars on her skin weren't random marks of violence, he realized. They were deliberate, artistic, like the ceremonial markings he'd seen among some of the warrior cultures in the Outer Rim. Hours passed as monitored her condition. Her vital signs slowly stabilized, and her breathing became stronger. The medical bay's systems worked around the clock, providing life support and medication tailored to her unique biology. Found himself checking on her every few minutes, adjusting settings and monitoring her progress. It wasn't until the 3rd day that she finally opened her eyes. Was in the bridge, reviewing shipping schedules and trying to calculate how much this detour was going to cost him, when the medical bay's alarm chimed softly. He rushed back to find her awake, sitting up on the medical bed with her back straight and her eyes alert. Those eyes were the deepest Violet had ever seen, like looking into the heart of a nebula. "Where am I?" she asked in perfect galactic standard, her voice low and musical but edged with steel. "My ship," replied, keeping his distance. "I found you in the asteroid field. Your vessel was badly damaged." She studied him for a long moment, those violet eyes taking in every detail of his appearance. Felt like he was being evaluated, measured against some invisible standard. "You are human," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my name is. I'm a cargo hauler." "I am Hiss of the 9th House," she replied, inclining her head slightly. "And I owe you my life." The formal way she spoke sent a chill down spine. In galactic politics, when someone from a house owed you their life, it usually meant either great fortune or terrible danger. Sometimes both. "What happened to your ship?" asked. Hiss's expression hardened, and for a moment caught a glimpse of something predatory in those violet eyes. "Pirates," she said simply. "They thought my vessel would be easy prey." "Were they wrong?" A smile played at the corners of her mouth, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Very wrong, but they had superior numbers and I was careless." Nodded, accepting the explanation even though he suspected there was much more to the story. "Well, you're safe now. My medical bay says you'll make a full recovery, though you should probably rest for a few more days." "Rest," Hiss repeated, as if the concept was foreign to her. "I am not accustomed to rest, but I will accept your counsel." She lay back down on the medical bed, but her eyes remained alert and watchful. Got the distinct impression that even injured and confined to his medical bay, this woman was still dangerous. Very dangerous. "I need to check your ship for salvageable materials," said. "The asteroid field isn't a safe place to linger." "Of course," Hiss agreed. "But be careful. If the pirates return, they will not expect to find a human ship here. That could work to your advantage, or it could make you a target." Spent the next several hours carefully exploring the remains of Hiss's ship. Most of it was too damaged to be worth salvaging, but he did find some interesting technology that he didn't recognize. The ship's computer core was intact, though encrypted beyond his ability to access. There were also several containers in what appeared to be a cargo hold, though their contents were sealed and labeled in a script he couldn't read. What caught his attention most, however, were the weapons. Hidden throughout the ship were military-grade plasma rifles, energy blades, and equipment that looked suspiciously like assassination gear. This wasn't the vessel of a merchant or diplomat. This was a ship designed for war. When returned to the Lucky Strike, he found Hiss in his galley, moving carefully but obviously much stronger than she'd been that morning. She'd found some of his spare clothes and managed to make them fit her tall frame, though the effect was somewhat incongruous. She looked like a deadly predator trying to disguise herself as a cargo hauler. "Your ship's computer systems are quite sophisticated," she said without preamble, "for a human vessel." Raised an eyebrow. "You've been in my computer." "I needed to understand my situation," she replied calmly. "I mean no harm to your systems or your privacy, but I had to know if I could trust you." "And can you?" Hiss studied him again with those unsettling violet eyes. "You saved my life when you could have simply taken my ship's salvage and left me to die. You provided medical care without asking for payment or guarantee of reward. You have not attempted to contact authorities or sell information about my presence here." She paused, as if coming to a decision. "Yes, I believe I can trust you." "Good," said, settling into a chair across from her. "Because I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." "Ask." "What exactly are you? Because I've been flying these routes for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone like you. Your ship isn't in any database I can access. Your weapons are military grade, and you talk like someone who's used to being obeyed." Leaned forward. "I need to know what I've got myself into." Hiss was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing the patterns of scars on her arms. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but carried an undertone of steel. "I am what your people might call an assassin," she said simply. "Though that term does not do justice to what I truly am. I am Hiss of the Ninth House, Blade of the Night Court, Guardian of the Silent Path. I have ended the lives of corrupt officials, war criminals, and those who prey upon the innocent. I am very good at what I do, perhaps the best." Felt his blood run cold. He'd rescued one of the galaxy's most dangerous killers. "And the pirates who attacked you. They made the mistake of targeting a convoy carrying refugees from the Altair colonies, children and elderly fleeing from the war zones." Hiss's eyes hardened. "I do not tolerate those who prey upon the helpless." "So you hunted them down?" "I did, and I would have eliminated them all had they not outnumbered me 3-1. She met his gaze steadily. "Does this knowledge change your opinion of me?" Considered the question carefully. He'd seen enough of the galaxy to know that sometimes violence was the only answer to greater violence. Pirates who targeted refugee ships were among the worst scum in space, and if this woman had been hunting them down, then maybe she wasn't the villain in this story. "I guess that depends," he said finally. "Are you planning to kill anyone on my ship?" "No." "Are you going to bring trouble down on me for helping you?" Hiss hesitated. I will not lie to you, my enemies are numerous and determined. If they discover that you aided me, they may seek retribution. But I will do everything in my power to ensure that does not happen. Nodded slowly. It wasn't the most reassuring answer, but it was honest. Then I guess we'd better get you somewhere safe. There is nowhere safe for me, Hiss said quietly. There are only places where my enemies have not yet looked. Then we'll find you one of those places, replied. But first, you need to finish healing, and I need to figure out how to modify my ship's medical bay to better handle your species' physiology. Something flickered in Hiss's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. You would do this, even knowing what I am. You said you hunt people who prey on the innocent, said. In my book, that makes you one of the good guys. The galaxy needs more good guys, even if they come with sharp edges. Hiss smiled then, and for the first time it reached her eyes. You are a rare man. In my experience, most humans are either too frightened or too greedy to help someone like me. Most humans haven't spent 8 years flying cargo runs through the worst parts of space, replied. You learn to judge people by their actions, not their reputation. The next few days fell into a routine, continued on his course towards station while Hiss recovered her strength. She proved to be an excellent patient, following his medical advice precisely and never complaining about the simple accommodations. She also turned out to be surprisingly good company. Hiss had traveled throughout the galaxy, and her stories of distant worlds and strange cultures kept entertained during the long hours of hyperspace travel. She spoke of crystalline cities that sang in the wind, of ancient forests where the trees themselves were sentient, and of void dwellers who had never known the touch of a planet's surface. In return, told her about his own journeys, the hidden asteroid base where smugglers traded in goods too dangerous for the regulated markets, the space station built inside a hollow moon, where refugees from a dozen different wars tried to build new lives, the derelict ships he'd found drifting between the stars, their crews vanished without explanation. As they talked, began to understand that Hiss wasn't the cold-blooded killer he'd initially imagined. She had a code, a set of principles that guided her actions. She only killed those who deserved death, and she took no pleasure in the act itself. It was simply what she was good at, what she'd been trained for since childhood. The Night Court found me when I was 7, she explained during one of their conversations. My parents had been killed in a political purge on my home world. I was alone, hungry, angry. The court offered me purpose, training, a family of sorts. Do you regret it? Asked. Hiss considered the question carefully. I regret the necessity of what I do, she said finally. But I do not regret doing it. The galaxy is a dangerous place. Someone must stand against those who would exploit that danger for their own gain. Understood that sentiment better than he cared to admit. His own decision to become an independent cargo hauler had been motivated by similar feelings. He'd grown tired of working for corporations that cared more about profit margins than the people they employed. Flying solo was dangerous and often lonely, but it let him live according to his own principles. By the time they reached station, Hiss was fully recovered and moving with the fluid grace that suspected was her natural state. She helped him unload his cargo, proving surprisingly knowledgeable about trade regulations and shipping procedures. The rare earth minerals he'd been carrying fetched an excellent price, partly due to her suggestions about timing and negotiation tactics. You have a good eye for business, observed as they completed the transactions. Information is often more valuable than weapons, Hiss replied. The Night Court taught me to observe everything, remember everything. Trade patterns, political alliances, economic trends, they all matter when you're trying to understand how the galaxy truly works. As they prepared to leave station, realized he faced a decision. Hiss had proven herself to be intelligent, capable, and surprisingly trustworthy. She'd also made it clear that she had nowhere else to go, no safe harbor where she could rest and plan her next move. I have a proposition for you, he said as they sat in the Lucky Strikes galley, sharing a simple meal. I could use a partner, someone with your skills, your knowledge of the galaxy. The cargo business is getting more dangerous every year, and having backup would be invaluable. Hiss raised an eyebrow. You would trust me as a partner, knowing what I am. I've been watching you for a week, replied. You've had dozens of opportunities to kill me or take my ship. Instead, you've helped me negotiate better prices for my cargo and shared information that's probably worth more than I make in a year. Yes, I'd trust you as a partner. And what would I gain from such an arrangement? smiled, a place to belong, work that matters, and the chance to help people while staying ahead of your enemies. My routes take me to places where the major shipping lines don't go, where people need help and can't always pay for it. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest work. Hiss was quiet for a long time, her violet eyes distant. I have spent my entire adult life in the shadows, she said finally. Moving from target to target, contract to contract. I have never had a home, never had a friend who wasn't also a fellow assassin. The idea is appealing. Then it's settled, said, extending his hand. Welcome aboard, partner. Hiss looked at his outstretched hand for a moment, then clasped it firmly. Her skin was warm and her grip was strong, and felt like he was shaking hands with destiny itself. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving my life and for offering me a chance to live it differently. As the Lucky Strike departed station and headed for the outer rim, reflected on how much his life had changed in just 1 week. He'd started out as a solo cargo hauler trying to make an honest living in a dangerous galaxy. Now he had a partner who was one of the most skilled killers in known space, and somehow that felt like the beginning of something important. Looking at Hiss as she studied the navigation charts, realized that saving her life might have been the best decision he'd ever made. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of pirates and predators and people who preyed on the innocent. But now he had someone watching his back, someone who 3 months into their partnership discovered that having the galaxy's deadliest assassin as his co-pilot came with unexpected benefits. Hiss had an encyclopedic knowledge of trade routes, black market contacts, and political situations across dozens of star systems. What should have been routine cargo runs turned into highly profitable ventures as she guided him toward opportunities that other independent haulers never heard about. There, she said, pointing to a data entry on his shipping board. Medical supplies to the Vega 7 colony. The posted rate is standard, but they're desperate. The main shipping lanes have been disrupted by the hegemony blockade. Studied the contract. Vega 7 was a small agricultural world in a disputed border region. Getting there would require passage through 3 different territorial zones, each controlled by hostile factions. Most commercial haulers wouldn't touch it. The risk premium alone would triple our fee, said thoughtfully. But it's dangerous. Military checkpoints, possible pirate activity, and if we get caught in the middle of a shooting war. The medical supplies include antibiotics for a bacterial outbreak, Hiss continued. Without them, the colonists will face a plague that could kill thousands. Children will die, families will be destroyed. Looked at her, nodding the subtle tension in her posture. This matters to you personally. I have seen what disease can do to a population when medical aid is delayed, she said quietly. It is not a death I would wish on anyone. The job took them through the most dangerous space lanes had ever flown. They were stopped by hegemony patrol ships twice, questioned by border guards 3 times, and shadowed by unidentified vessels for 2 full days. But Hiss seemed to know exactly what to say at each checkpoint, which officials to bribe, and how to avoid the worst of the trouble. How do you know all this? Asked as they cleared the final military checkpoint before Vega 7. Information networks, Hiss replied simply. The Night Court maintains contacts throughout the galaxy, smugglers, diplomats, military officers, trade officials. Everyone has something to hide and everyone needs favors occasionally. When they arrived at Vega 7, the colonial administrator met them personally at the spaceport. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and hands stained with soil from the colony's farms. You have no idea what this means to us, she said as they unloaded the medical supplies. The outbreak was spreading faster than we could contain it. Another week and we would have lost the eastern settlements entirely. Watched Hiss interact with the colonists and was struck by how different she seemed here. Gone was the predatory grace of the assassin, replaced by something gentler. She helped unload cargo with careful efficiency, spoke quietly to worried parents about their sick children, and even assisted the colony's doctor in organizing the distribution of antibiotics. She's not what I expected, the colonial administrator said to as they watched Hiss demonstrate the proper dosing procedures to the medical staff. How do you mean? When I saw her scars, I assumed she was military. Special forces, maybe, or mercenary. But she knows more about civilian medical procedures than most trained medics. She's been teaching our people how to set up proper quarantine protocols and sterilization procedures. nodded, filing away another piece of the puzzle that was his partner. She's had an interesting life. The payment for the medical run was everything Hiss had predicted. The Colony Council not only paid the full fee plus danger premium, but also offered them a permanent contract for supply runs. It was the kind of steady work that most independent haulers could only dream of. "You could have told me from the beginning that this was personal," said as they departed Vega 7. "Would it have changed your decision?" Hiss asked. "No, but I would have understood your investment in the outcome." She was quiet for a moment, watching the stars wheel past the viewports. "The Night Court's first mission sent me to a frontier world not unlike Vega 7. A corrupt governor had been diverting medical supplies to sell on the black market while children died of preventable diseases. I eliminated the governor, but the damage was already done. Hundreds of innocents had died while I was gathering intelligence and planning the assassination. That wasn't your fault." "Perhaps not, but I learned that sometimes the most important missions are not about eliminating targets. Sometimes they are about preventing tragedies before they occur." Their reputation spread quickly through the independent hauler networks. The partnership of a human cargo pilot and his mysterious alien partner began taking on increasingly dangerous and lucrative runs. They smuggled refugees out of war zones, delivered critical supplies to besieged colonies, and transported sensitive cargo through hostile territory. What made them special wasn't just Hiss's skills as a former assassin, though those certainly came in handy. It was her network of contacts, her ability to gather intelligence, and her absolute dedication to helping those who couldn't help themselves. Found himself taking jobs that a year ago he would have considered too risky or too altruistic to be worth his time. The change in his perspective wasn't lost on him. "You're making me a better person," he told her one evening as they shared dinner in the Lucky Strike's cramped galley. "I am doing no such thing," Hiss replied with amusement. "You are already a good man. I am simply providing you with opportunities to act on your principles." "Is that what this is? Acting on principles?" "What else would you call it? You could be running luxury goods between core worlds, making easy money with minimal risk. Instead, you choose to help colonies and refugees and people who cannot afford to pay premium rates for shipping services. That is not the behavior of a man motivated solely by profit." Their biggest test came when they received a contract that seemed too good to be true. A wealthy industrialist named Vex wanted them to transport a single container from his private facility to a remote research station. The cargo was listed as scientific equipment. The destination was only 3 days away, and the payment was enough to fund their operations for 6 months. "It's obviously a trap," said, reviewing the contract details. "Obviously," Hiss agreed. "The question is whether it's a trap meant for us specifically, or simply a dangerous job that legitimate haulers are too intelligent to accept." They spent 2 days researching Vex and his business operations. What they found was disturbing. Vex Industries was involved in weapons manufacturing, illegal genetic research, and slave trading. The industrialist himself was wanted by law enforcement in a dozen systems, though his wealth and connections had kept him beyond the reach of justice. "The research station is in the Maelstrom sector," Hiss reported. "Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's rumored to be conducting experiments on sentient beings." "So we turned down the job," said, "Easy decision." But Hiss was studying the contract with a thoughtful expression. "What if we accept the job, but with modifications?" "What kind of modifications?" "We transport the cargo as requested, but we also gather intelligence on Vex's operations, document evidence of his crimes, and ensure that the appropriate authorities receive that information." Stared at her. "You want to spy on one of the most dangerous criminals in the galaxy while transporting his cargo." "I want to gather evidence that will put him in prison where he belongs," Hiss corrected. "The Night Court has been hunting Vex for years, but he's always been too well protected to target directly. This contract gives us access to his inner circle. And if he discovers what we're doing, then we improvise." Had learned to trust Hiss's instincts over the past 3 months, but this plan made him nervous. Still, the idea of helping to bring down someone like Vex was appealing. The man's crimes had affected thousands of innocent people across the galaxy. "What would we need to do?" Hiss smiled and caught a glimpse of the predator that lurked beneath her calm exterior. "First, we modify the cargo container. I have some specialized equipment that can record everything that happens around it. Second, we research the research station and plan multiple escape routes. Third, we prepare for the possibility that this mission will end in violence. The pickup went smoothly. Vex's facility was a massive industrial complex orbiting a gas giant in an unclaimed system. Their contact was a nervous human who their credentials and supervised the loading of the cargo container. The container itself was sealed and marked with biohazard symbols, but its instruments couldn't penetrate whatever shielding surrounded its contents. Organic, Hiss murmured as they secured the container in their cargo hold. Whatever's inside is definitely organic. The research station turned out to be even worse than they'd imagined. It was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, hidden among hundreds of similar rocks in an unstable orbit around a dying star. The approach required precise navigation through a maze of radiation storms and gravitational anomalies. "Welcome to Paradise Station," the traffic controller announced with bitter irony as they received docking permission. The station's interior was a nightmare of sterile corridors and locked laboratories. Saw enough through reinforced windows to confirm his worst fears about what happened here. Medical equipment that looked more like torture devices, holding cells designed for sentient beings. Research notes posted on walls that made his stomach turn. "We need to document everything," Hiss said quietly as they made their way to the delivery bay. The handoff should have been routine. Deliver the container, collect payment, leave immediately. But as the station's medical staff began examining the cargo, realized what they were actually transporting. The container held a living being, not just any being, but a member of a species that recognized from his travels. There were peaceful telepaths who lived in the Outer Rim, known for their healing abilities and their absolute pacifism. The creature in the container was barely alive, its natural bioluminescence flickering weakly. "They're using telepaths to enhance their research," Hiss observed, her voice carefully controlled. "Forcing them to experience the pain of test subjects, amplifying emotional responses for study." "Felt sick, we can't leave it here." "We can't save it without compromising our mission," Hiss replied. "If we act now, Vex will know we betrayed him. The evidence we've gathered will be worthless, and he'll simply move his operations elsewhere. So we let an innocent being die." "No," Hiss said firmly. "We complete the mission as planned, then we come back, tonight." The rest of the day was the longest of life. They collected their payment, filed the proper departure documents, and left Paradise Station according to schedule. But instead of jumping to hyperspace, they powered down their engines and drifted among the asteroids, waiting for darkness to fall across the station's rotation. "The rescue will have to be surgical," Hiss explained as they prepared for their return. "Too much noise and they'll kill the prisoners before we can save them." "Prisoners, plural." "I counted at least 12 holding cells during our. The we delivered wasn't the first." Hiss had changed into what now recognized as her working clothes. Black tactical gear that seemed to absorb light, weapons harnesses that held more tools of death than he cared to count, and a helmet with built-in sensors and communication equipment. "This is what you used to do," said. It wasn't a question. "This is what I still do," she corrected. "The Night Court taught me to hunt monsters. Vex and his researchers qualify." The infiltration was a masterpiece of precision violence. Hiss moved through Paradise Station like death itself, eliminating guards and security systems with surgical efficiency. Followed at a distance, providing technical support and watching for reinforcements. They found 17 prisoners in the research labs. Not just but members of a dozen different species, all chosen for specific biological or mental characteristics that made them valuable test subjects. Some had been there for months, others for years. All of them were in various stages of physical and psychological breakdown. "The escape pods won't hold them all," said as they began freeing the prisoners. "Then we use the station's shuttles," Hiss replied, "and we make sure no one can follow us." What followed was organized chaos. Piloted a stolen shuttle packed with rescued prisoners, while Hiss systematically destroyed Paradise Station's research data and experimental equipment. The explosions that followed could be seen from 3-star systems away. By the time they reached a safe system with adequate medical facilities, word of Paradise Station's destruction had spread throughout the galaxy. The evidence that Hiss had gathered during their cargo run was already in the hands of law enforcement agencies, and Vex found himself the target of arrest warrants in 37 different systems. The prisoners are going to recover, the medical center's director assured them. Some will need extensive therapy, but they'll live normal lives again thanks to what you did. Felt a satisfaction deeper than any he'd experienced from successful cargo runs. How long do you think before Vex figures out it was us? He already knows, Hiss said calmly. Our names are probably at the top of his kill list by now. Does that bother you? Not particularly. He was already trying to have me killed. Now he's simply being more obvious about it. As they departed the medical station, reflected on how much his life had changed since rescuing Hiss from that asteroid field. He'd gone from hauling cargo for profit to actively hunting the galaxy's worst criminals. It was dangerous work, but it felt important in a way that simple commerce never had. What's our next move? He asked. Hiss smiled, and this time the predatory edge was unmistakable. Vex has facilities throughout the galaxy. Research stations, weapons factories, slave markets. The authorities now know where to look, but they'll need evidence to act. And we're going to provide that evidence. We're going to do more than that, she said. We're going to make sure that every criminal operation in the galaxy knows what happens when they prey on the innocent. We're going to become their nightmare. Looked out at the stars ahead of them, thinking about the rescued prisoners who were now free to live their lives. Thinking about the colonies they'd helped, the refugees they'd transported to safety, and the difference they'd made in just 3 short months. I can live with that, he said. Over the following weeks, and Hiss refined their methods. They developed a system for gathering intelligence, documenting criminal activities, and coordinating with law enforcement agencies across the galaxy. The Lucky Strike was modified with hidden sensors, recording equipment, and enhanced defensive systems. Their reputation in criminal circles began to change. Where once they'd been seen as talented but unremarkable cargo haulers, they now inspired fear among those who operated outside the law. Word spread that the human and his partner were not to be trusted with illegal cargo, not to be hired for questionable jobs, and definitely not to be crossed. We're becoming famous, observed as he reviewed the latest shipping board postings. Several contracts had been withdrawn the moment their names appeared as bidders. Infamous, Hiss corrected. Fame implies positive recognition. What we have is more accurately described as a reputation for being dangerous to criminals. Is that a bad thing? On the contrary, it means our work is having the desired effect. The more criminals fear us, the more careful they'll be about their operations, and the more careful they are, the more mistakes they'll make. Their next target found them instead of the other way around. A message arrived through encrypted channels while they were resupplying at a border station. The sender was anonymous, but the information was detailed and disturbing. A slaving operation was using modified cargo ships to transport captured civilians from war-torn systems to private buyers in the core worlds. The slaves were being processed through a facility hidden in an asteroid mining complex, where they were sorted, conditioned, and prepared for sale. The intelligence is too good, said, studying the data. Anonymous sources don't usually provide facility blueprints and guard rotation schedules. Agreed, Hiss said. This has the hallmarks of a trap. The question is whether it's a trap worth walking into. They spent days researching the mining complex and its legitimate operations. What they found was a textbook example of criminal enterprise hiding behind legal business. The mining company was real, profitable, and completely controlled by a syndicate with ties to every major criminal organization in 3 sectors. Even if it's a trap, the intelligence appears accurate, Hiss concluded. The slaving operation exists, and it's operating exactly as described. So what do we do? We spring the trap, but on our terms. The plan they developed was audacious even by their standards. Instead of infiltrating the mining complex secretly, they would arrive as legitimate cargo haulers responding to a shipping contract. The complex maintained a fiction of legal operations, which meant they had to accept properly documented deliveries and maintain normal business protocols. They won't expect a direct approach, Hiss explained. Criminals who set traps usually expect their targets to behave like criminals themselves. The cargo they would deliver was carefully chosen, mining equipment that the complex had actually ordered from a legitimate supplier. Hiss had intercepted the shipment through her network of contacts, ensuring that their arrival would be expected and documented. "What about the real delivery crew?" asked. "They're enjoying an unexpected vacation on a resort planet, all expenses paid. They'll be returned to duty once our mission is complete." The approach to the mining complex went exactly as planned. Their credentials were, their cargo manifest was accepted, and they were assigned a docking bay in the facility's commercial section. Everything appeared routine and normal. It wasn't until they began unloading their cargo that realized how elaborate the trap actually was. The mining complex was genuinely operational, with hundreds of legitimate workers and full production schedules. The slaving operation was hidden so deeply within the legal business that even the legitimate employees probably didn't know it existed. "Professional," Hiss murmured as they completed the delivery procedures. "Whoever designed this operation understands the value of misdirection." They spent 2 days at the complex, ostensibly waiting for return cargo that would make their trip profitable. During that time, Hiss conducted what she called environmental reconnaissance while handled the legitimate business negotiations. "The slaves are being held in a sealed section of the deep mining levels," she reported during their second evening. "Approximately 40 individuals, mostly human colonists from the frontier worlds. The processing facility is adjacent to the holding area, and both are heavily guarded." "How heavily?" "More than we can handle with direct assault. This will require subtlety." Had learned that when Hiss talked about subtlety, she usually meant that people were going to die, but very quietly and efficiently. The plan she outlined confirmed that expectation. "The mining complex operates on a strict schedule," she explained. "Shift changes occur at predetermined times, security rotations follow established patterns, and the legitimate operations provide excellent cover for our activities." "What activities?" "We're going to cause a cascading system failure that will require emergency evacuation of the deep levels. During the chaos, we'll extract the slaves and eliminate the processing facility." "And the guards?" "We'll be too busy dealing with the emergency to interfere with our rescue operation." The system failure began at exactly 300 local time, when Hiss's carefully placed charges destroyed several critical support systems in the mining tunnels. Emergency alarms echoed throughout the complex as automated systems began evacuating workers from the affected areas. In the confusion that followed, and Hiss made their way to the slave-holding facility. The guards there were indeed distracted by the emergency, making it relatively easy for Hiss to eliminate them without raising additional alarms. The rescued slaves were in worse condition than had expected. Most showed signs of physical abuse, and several required immediate medical attention. Getting them to safety would require more than just opening their cell doors. "We need medical supplies and transportation," said as he examined the most severely injured prisoners. "Already arranged," Hiss replied. "The emergency evacuation procedures require all personnel to muster at designated safety stations. We'll simply add our group to one of the legitimate evacuation shuttles." The deception worked perfectly. In the chaos of the emergency evacuation, 40 additional people in mining coveralls attracted no attention from the legitimate facility personnel. By the time the complex's managers realized what had happened, the rescued slaves were already in the custody of law enforcement agencies, and the evidence of the slaving operation was in the hands of prosecutors. "Another successful mission," said as they departed the mining complex. "The most successful so far," Hiss agreed. "We've disrupted a major criminal operation, rescued 40 innocent people, and provided evidence that will lead to dozens of arrests. And we've done it all while maintaining our cover as legitimate cargo haulers." Nodded, feeling the familiar satisfaction that came from work well done. But he also felt something else, something that had been growing stronger over the past few months. A sense of purpose that went beyond mere profit or survival. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what we're doing, what we've become." "And what conclusion have you reached?" "We're not just cargo haulers anymore. We're something else, something new." Hiss considered this. What would you call us? Looked out at the stars, thinking about all the people they'd helped and all the criminals they'd brought to justice. "Protectors," he said finally. "We protect the people who can't protect themselves." "I like that," Hiss said softly. "Protector and Protector Hiss of the Lucky Strike. It has a nice ring to it." As they jumped to hyperspace, heading toward their next destination and their next mission, realized that saving Hiss's life had been more than just a good deed. It had been the first step in becoming the man he was meant to be. The message that changed everything arrived on a quiet Tuesday while and Hiss were resupplying at New Geneva Station. It came through official Galactic Alliance channels, marked with the highest security classifications, and signed by Admiral Sarah herself. Stared at the message header for a full minute before opening it. Admiral was his older sister, a woman who had risen through the military ranks to become one of the Alliance's most respected commanders. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since their last argument about his decision to leave corporate shipping and go independent. "You look troubled," Hiss observed from across the Lucky Strike small communications alcove. "Family," said simply, then opened the message. The contents made his blood run cold. A new threat had emerged in the Outer Rim territories, something the military was calling the Shadow Fleet. Ships were disappearing along the major trade routes, but these weren't ordinary pirate attacks. Entire vessels vanished without distress calls, leaving no debris and no witnesses. "The pattern suggests technology far beyond anything in our current databases," the message continued in his sister's crisp military prose. "Ships are being removed from spacetime itself, leaving no trace of their existence. Civilian shipping companies are pulling their vessels from affected routes, threatening economic collapse in 17 systems." Scrolled down to the part that made his stomach sink. "Intelligence suggests that the Shadow Fleet is targeting specific individuals. Your name has appeared on intercepted communications, along with that of your partner. Request immediate meeting to discuss security arrangements and possible alliance protection." "Bad news?" Hiss asked, reading his expression. Turned the display toward her. "Apparently we've attracted some very dangerous attention." Hiss read the message quickly, her violet eyes scanning the technical details and threat assessments. When she finished, her expression was thoughtful rather than concerned. "Interesting," she said finally. "Interesting? My sister thinks we're being hunted by aliens with impossible technology, and you think it's interesting." "The technology isn't impossible," Hiss corrected. "It's simply highly advanced, and the fact that they're targeting us specifically suggests that our recent activities have been noticed by someone with considerable resources." "Someone like who?" "Someone who doesn't appreciate interference with criminal operations. Someone with access to experimental technology. Someone who prefers to eliminate problems rather than adapt to them." Considered this. Over the past 6 months, their efforts had disrupted criminal enterprises worth billions of credits. They'd freed hundreds of slaves, destroyed several illegal research facilities, and provided evidence that had led to thousands of arrests. Making enemies was inevitable. "So what do we do? Accept alliance protection and go into hiding?" Hiss smiled and recognized the predatory expression that meant she was planning something dangerous. "We do what we've always done. We gather intelligence, analyze the threat, and then eliminate it." "You want to hunt the Shadow Fleet?" "I want to understand what we're dealing with. The Night Court taught me that fear of the unknown is often worse than the reality of a known threat." They agreed to meet with Admiral, but on neutral ground. The rendezvous point was a small asteroid research station in an unclaimed system, staffed by civilian scientists who had no political affiliations. It would give them a chance to assess the military's intelligence without walking into a potential trap. Admiral Sarah was everything remembered and more. She was tall and imposing in her dark blue uniform, with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. But there was also a warmth there, a genuine concern that reminded why he'd looked up to his sister throughout his childhood. "You look good," she said as they met in the station's small conference room. "Independent Hauling agrees with you." "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting, Admiral," replied formally, aware that they were being recorded. Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Call me Sarah when we're talking family business, and you must be Hiss. Your reputation precedes you." Hiss inclined her head respectfully. "Admiral, I appreciate your discretion in arranging this meeting." "Let's get straight to the point," Sarah said, activating a holographic display that showed shipping routes throughout the Outer Rim. "We've lost 43 vessels in the past 2 months, military, civilian, and commercial ships. No survivors, no debris, no explanation." The display highlighted the locations of each disappearance and could see a clear pattern emerging. The attacks were concentrated around systems where he and Hiss had conducted their recent operations. They're following our trail, he realized. More than that, Sarah continued. We've intercepted several communications that mention you by name. Whoever is doing this, they consider you a priority target. Do we have any visual confirmation of these Shadow Fleet vessels? Hiss asked. Sarah touched a control, and the display shifted to show a series of blurry sensor readings. This is the best we have. Ships that appear on long-range sensors for seconds at a time, then vanish completely. No energy signatures match anything in our databases. Studied the data. How long have you been tracking this? 3 months. It started right after your operation at Paradise Station. Sarah looked at him seriously. I know we've had our differences, but you're my brother. I can't protect you if you won't let me. And if we accept Alliance protection, what happens to our work? Asked. Do we abandon the people who depend on us? Do we let criminals operate freely because hiding is safer than fighting? Sarah sighed. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that question. But you knew I would. Yes, because despite everything, you're still the stubborn idealist I remember from childhood. She leaned forward. There might be another option, something that would let you continue your work while giving you the resources to deal with this threat. Exchanged glances with Hiss. What kind of option? Special Operations Commission. You'd technically be Alliance military contractors with access to intelligence networks, advanced equipment, and backup when you need it. In exchange, you'd accept missions that serve Alliance interests while continuing your current activities. What's the catch? Hiss asked. The missions might be more dangerous than what you're used to, and you'd be operating under Alliance oversight, which means following orders even when you disagree with them. Considered the proposal carefully. Working for the military again wasn't appealing, but the resources and protection they offered might be essential for dealing with the Shadow Fleet. We'd retain operational independence for our humanitarian work, he asked. Yes, the Alliance has no interest in interfering with legitimate rescue operations. And you'd provide intelligence support for tracking down the Shadow Fleet. Full intelligence support, plus access to experimental weapons and defensive systems. Looked at Hiss, who nodded slightly. We'll need time to consider the offer. Of course, but this threat is escalating quickly. Another ship disappeared just yesterday, and we have reason to believe they're closing in on your location. The meeting ended with Sarah providing them with secure communication codes and a deadline for their decision. As they prepared to leave the research station, found himself thinking about paths not taken and choices that couldn't be undone. You're considering accepting, Hiss observed as they made their way back to the Lucky Strike. Aren't you? I am considering the implications of refusing, she replied. The Shadow Fleet represents a threat not just to us, but to everyone we've helped. If they eliminate us, who will protect the colonies and refugees? And if we accept the Alliance offer, we might lose our independence. We'd be soldiers again instead of protectors. Perhaps we would gain the tools necessary to be more effective protectors. They were still debating the decision when the first attack came. Was in the engineering section, performing routine maintenance on the Lucky Strike's power systems, when every alarm on the ship began screaming simultaneously. He rushed to the bridge to find Hiss at the controls, her fingers dancing over the navigation interface. What's happening? Unknown vessel approaching fast, she replied tersely. It appeared on sensors 30 seconds ago, already within weapons range. Threw himself into the pilot's chair and activated the ship's defensive systems. The Lucky Strike had been upgraded over the past few months with military-grade shields and weapons, but she was still fundamentally a cargo hauler facing unknown technology. There, Hiss pointed to the main display. The ship that appeared before them was unlike anything had ever seen. It was roughly triangular in shape, but the edges seemed to blur and shift as he watched. The hull appeared to be made of some material that bent light around itself, making it difficult to focus on directly. It's beautiful, Hiss murmured, and caught something like awe in her voice. It's also charging weapons, replied, nodding the energy readings on his tactical display. The attack came without warning. One moment they were studying the alien vessel, the next moment the Lucky Strike was tumbling through space as unknown energy weapons tore through their shields like paper. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as systems failed throughout the ship. "Engines are down," reported, fighting to regain control. "Main power at 30% and falling." "Hull breach in cargo bay too," Hiss added. "Emergency bulkheads are holding." The alien ship had stopped firing, but it was maintaining position directly ahead of them. As watched, a brilliant beam of light extended from the vessel toward the Lucky Strike, enveloping their ship in some kind of energy field. "They're tractoring us," said, recognizing the sensation of external forces controlling their movement. "No," Hiss corrected, studying her instruments. "They're scanning us. This is some kind of analysis beam." The scanning lasted for exactly 60 seconds, then abruptly stopped. The alien vessel began moving away, apparently satisfied with whatever it had learned. "Should we pursue?" asked, bringing the engines back online. "With what? They demonstrated that our weapons are useless against their technology." Hiss was reviewing the sensor logs from the encounter. "But I don't think their purpose was to destroy us." "Then what?" "Assessment. They wanted to study our capabilities, our technology, perhaps our biological characteristics. We've been." Felt a chill run down his spine. "For what purpose?" "Unknown, but I suspect we'll find out soon enough." The second attack came 3 days later, while they were en route to deliver medical supplies to a frontier colony. This time there were 2 ships, and they didn't bother with scanning before opening fire. The battle was brief and vicious. The Lucky Strike's weapons managed to score hits on one of the alien vessels, but the damage seemed to repair itself almost instantly. Their shields collapsed within minutes, and only Hiss's brilliant piloting kept them alive long enough to reach the shelter of an asteroid field. "They're learning," said as they hid among the rocks, watching for pursuit. "Those ships adapted to our weapons in real time." "Adaptive technology," Hiss agreed. "Each encounter teaches them how to counter our capabilities more effectively." "Which means the next attack will be worse." "Much worse." That evening, while conducting repairs in the relative safety of the asteroid field, made his decision. "We're accepting Sarah's offer," he told Hiss. "We need help, and we need it now." "I agree, but I think there's more to this situation than your sister revealed." "How do you mean?" Hiss pulled up the sensor logs from their encounters with the Shadow Fleet. "These ships aren't just hunting us randomly. They're testing us, learning from us, adapting to our capabilities. That suggests a purpose beyond simple elimination." "What kind of purpose?" "Recruitment or replacement. Something that requires understanding our methods and abilities rather than simply destroying them." Studied the data, noting the patterns that Hiss had identified. The alien ships had indeed been more interested in analysis than annihilation, at least initially. But that was changing with each encounter. "You think they're preparing for something bigger?" "I think we've stumbled into something much more complex than a simple criminal vendetta, and I think your sister knows more about it than she's saying." The meeting with Admiral took place aboard the Alliance cruiser Determination, a massive warship stationed at the edge of Alliance space. The ship's conference room was filled with officers didn't recognize, along with several civilians whose presence suggested intelligence or scientific backgrounds. "Thank you for accepting our offer," Sarah began formally. "Your first mission briefing will begin momentarily." "Wait," interrupted. "We haven't formally accepted anything yet." Sarah's expression was apologetic but firm. "I'm afraid circumstances have accelerated beyond our original timeline. The Shadow Fleet attacked a civilian transport convoy 6 hours ago. 40,000 refugees, including families with children." Felt the blood drain from his face. "Survivors?" "None, but this time we have evidence." The holographic display activated, showing the recovered debris from the convoy attack. Unlike previous encounters, this time the Shadow Fleet had left traces of their technology behind. "The attack pattern was different," one of the scientists explained. "Instead of completely vaporizing the ships, they appear to have extracted something from them, cargo data cores, possibly even crew members." "They're collecting specimens," Hiss said quietly. "That's our assessment as well," Sarah confirmed. "And based on the progression of their attacks, we believe their collection efforts are building towards something significant." "Studied the debris analysis. What do you need from us?" "Your unique perspective. You've had more direct contact with the Shadow Fleet than anyone else who's survived." You've seen their capabilities firsthand, and you've managed to evade them multiple times. Barely pointed out. Barely is better than not at all. We need you to help us understand their tactics, their technology, and their objectives, and we need you to serve as bait. Bait? They're hunting you specifically. That gives us an opportunity to study them under controlled conditions, to gather intelligence that might help us develop countermeasures. Hiss leaned forward. What aren't you telling us, Admiral? This operation feels too well planned for a response to recent events. Sarah exchanged glances with the other officers in the room. The truth is that we've been aware of the Shadow Fleet for longer than we initially indicated. What's new is their focus on you two specifically. How much longer? Asked. 18 months. They first appeared in the Outer Rim territories, conducting what we thought were routine pirate activities. It wasn't until recently that we realized the scope of their operations. Felt a surge of anger. You've known about this threat for over a year, and you didn't warn civilian shipping. We didn't understand the threat, Sarah replied. The early attacks looked like standard piracy. Ships disappearing, cargo stolen, crews presumed dead. It was only when you two began your operations that the pattern changed. Changed how? One of the intelligence officers answered. The Shadow Fleet began specifically targeting criminal organizations, slaving operations, weapons dealers, illegal research facilities. At first we thought they were competitors, another criminal enterprise eliminating the competition. But then they started hunting you, Sarah continued, and their methodology changed. They began using advanced technology, scanning and analyzing instead of simply destroying. They wanted to understand what made you effective against criminals. Hiss was studying the data with intense concentration. They're not criminals, she said finally. They're researchers or soldiers, possibly both. Explain. The progression of their activities follows a military intelligence pattern. Reconnaissance, infiltration, analysis, adaptation. They've been studying criminal networks throughout the galaxy, learning how they operate and how they can be disrupted. To what end? Asked. To replace them, Hiss said with certainty, or to eliminate them entirely. The room fell silent as the implications of that statement sank in. If the Shadow Fleet was conducting a galaxy-wide campaign against criminal organizations, their actions might actually serve Alliance interests. But their methods and their unknown agenda made them a potential threat to legitimate operations as well. The question, Sarah said finally, is whether they see us as allies or obstacles. Based on their attacks against us, replied, I'd say obstacles. Unless, Hiss added, they're testing us to determine our suitability for recruitment. The mission they were offered was both simple and terrifying, and Hiss would continue their normal operations, serving as bait to draw out the Shadow Fleet. But this time, they'd be supported by hidden Alliance vessels equipped with the most advanced sensors available. The goal is intelligence gathering, Sarah explained. We need to understand their technology, their capabilities, and their objectives before we can determine the appropriate response. And if they decide to destroy us instead of studying us, asked, then you'll have Alliance military support within minutes instead of hours. Minutes might not be enough against their technology, Hiss pointed out. No, but it's the best we can offer, and frankly, it's better odds than you have operating alone. Considered the proposal. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it also offered the chance to gather information that might protect thousands of innocent people from future attacks. There's one condition, he said finally. We maintain operational control of our humanitarian missions. If we're serving as bait, fine, but we're not abandoning the people who depend on us. Sarah nodded. Agreed. Your cover must be maintained anyway. Continuing your normal activities is essential to the mission's success. Then we accept, Hiss said. When do we begin? You already have, Sarah replied. The moment you entered this system, you became part of the operation. Shadow Fleet vessels have been detected at the edge of sensor range since yesterday. Felt his blood chill. They followed us here. They've been following you for weeks. We're simply providing them with a more attractive target. The determination launched the Lucky Strike through its main hangar bay, a procedure that felt disturbingly like being fired from a weapon. As they cleared the massive cruiser and set course for their next delivery, couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying toward their doom. Second thoughts, Hiss asked, nodding his expression. Many, but the right choice isn't always the safe choice. No, she agreed, it rarely is. Their destination was a small mining colony that had requested emergency medical supplies after an industrial accident. It was exactly the kind of humanitarian mission they'd been conducting for months, and exactly the kind of situation that would draw the Shadow Fleet's attention. "How long do you think before they show up?" asked as they approached the colony. "They're already here," Hiss replied, indicating her sensor display. Looked and saw nothing but empty space. Where? They're using some kind of cloaking technology, but the gravimetric sensors detect mass displacement. 3 ships maintaining position around the colony. They're waiting for us to land. Or they're protecting the colonists while they study our response to the situation. Realized that Hiss might be right. If the Shadow Fleet was interested in understanding their methods, they might want to observe a typical humanitarian mission without interference. "So what do we do?" "We complete the mission as planned," Hiss said, "and we see what happens." The landing proceeded normally. The colony administrator met them at the small spaceport, grateful for the medical supplies and unaware of the invisible watchers in orbit above. And Hiss unloaded the cargo, provided basic medical training to the colony's staff, and prepared to depart. It was as they were conducting final system checks that the Shadow Fleet revealed themselves. 3 ships materialized in orbit around the colony, their exotic hulls shimmering in the system's starlight. But this time, they didn't attack. Instead, they waited. "They want to communicate," Hiss said, studying the sensor readings. "How do you know?" "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, cycling through every known communication protocol in the Galactic database. They're trying to establish contact." Activated the communication system and cycled through the frequencies. On the 7th attempt, he found a clear signal. The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything he'd ever heard. It was clearly artificial, generated by some kind of translation system, but there was something almost musical about its cadence. "Human vessel Lucky Strike," the voice said. "We request dialogue." Looked at Hiss, who nodded encouragingly. "This is Captain, we're listening. You have proven capable of protecting innocent life and eliminating threats to galactic stability. These qualities are valued by our collective." "Who are you?" asked. "We are the vanguard of the synthesis. We maintain order where governments fail, eliminate corruption where law proves inadequate." "And why have you been attacking us?" "Assessment was necessary. Your methods and motivations required evaluation before contact could be established." Hiss leaned toward the microphone. "What do you want from us?" "Partnership," the voice replied. "The galaxy contains threats beyond the capability of any single species to address. Cooperation benefits all." Felt a chill run down his spine. The offer was tempting, but he'd learned to be suspicious of aliens bearing gifts. What kind of partnership? Continued operation under expanded parameters. Advanced technology, enhanced capabilities, access to intelligence networks spanning the galaxy. In exchange for service to the synthesis, elimination of designated threats, protection of designated assets, maintenance of galactic stability. Muted the communication system and turned to Hiss. "What do you think?" "I think we're being recruited by the galaxy's most advanced peacekeeping force," she replied. "And I think refusing might not be an option. But accepting means we become their agents instead of independent operators. Perhaps, or perhaps it means we gain the resources to help people on a scale we never imagined possible." Reactivated the communication system. "We need time to consider your offer." "Time is acceptable, but be aware that other forces threaten galactic stability. Your decision will determine whether you face these threats as allies or obstacles." The Shadow Fleet ships vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving and Hiss alone in orbit around the mining colony. The Alliance support vessels remained hidden, undoubtedly recording every moment of the encounter. "Well," said finally, "that wasn't what I expected." "No," Hiss agreed, "it was much more interesting." As they set course for their next destination, realized that their simple cargo hauling business had evolved into something far more complex. They were no longer just protectors of the innocent. They had become players in a galactic game whose rules they didn't understand, and whose stakes might be higher than they could imagine. But one thing remained constant: their commitment to helping those who couldn't help themselves. Whatever decision they made about the synthesis offer, that principle would guide their choice. The decision came sooner than it hoped. 3 days after the encounter with the synthesis, an urgent message arrived through Alliance channels. Admiral's face appeared on the secure communication display, but her expression was grim in a way that made stomach clench. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "The hegemony is mobilizing a fleet toward the galaxy was changing around them, but an Hiss would face whatever came next together. Understood that some fights were worth having, and some principles were worth defending. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years wasn't facing it alone.